app. Select the IBM Watson stage and pose your questions for the session. And now, please welcome Lewis Richardson.
Thanks, everyone. Good morning. I ask for you to be kind. I'm the IBM storyteller. Okay, so when you ask those questions, make sure they're simple ones. I reminded my son one time came home from high school after a big test, and I asked him. I said, "So, son, how did it go?" And he said, "Dad, you know that top 10%?" And I said, "Yes, son." He said, "I'm one of those people who make that possible." And that's where I stand today. I'm standing in an IBM stage with probably, I'm one of those people that make those top 10 smart people possible. So let's be kind on the questions. What you're going to hear this morning, what I'd like to share with you, I guess, is just some thoughts and ideas about AI. Again, I take it from a very much of a human point of view and an intersection between people and technology. And I'm very excited about what we're on the cusp of doing. Actually, what we are doing, not just on the cusp of doing, but what we are doing. And there's some things that I've observed, and I thought we'd just take some time and share that with you. Everyone's pretty familiar with this story about the lion and the gazelle and about getting up in the morning and running. And it's very much the same in business, because with AI specifically, if you're not thinking about that already, if you're not actually acting on it already, you're kind of getting behind, because AI is one of those things that's kind of like, it's kind of like if you had a 5-year-old kid who's getting ready for first grade and you said, "You know what, I'm not really into first grade yet. I don't know they got first grade figured out yet, so I'm going to wait a while and wait 4 or 5 years, and then I'll put my kid in first grade 5 years from now." You realize how far back your child's going to be. The same thing happens with AI. You need to be moving with this. And so the idea is that you need to be thinking about how are you going and what are you going to run into. The Darwin here says, it's not the strongest or the smartest that's going to survive, but the one that's most adaptive to change. And that word, adapt, is one of those things that I actually looked at and thought, well, what is the difference? What is the difference about what we need to be doing? For so long, we've been actually looking at technologies, and in our businesses, we've been adopting them. We adopt a new CRM system, we adopt a new email campaign system, we adopt a new whatever. And adopting is just a matter of taking something on as your own. And so if the point is, I just want to take something, some software, something that somebody created, some application, and I'm going to put it in my organization and we're going to make it ours, then that's the adopting. But now's the time not to adopt any longer. Now's the time to adapt, because what's happening is not just the applications are changing, but life around us is changing. The environment in which we live, the things that are expected of us, those are all changing. And that's not require us to do more than just adopt new technologies. It's about adapting to what's new. So for the next couple of minutes, what we'll do is we'll spend some time just talking about these 4 areas. There's 4 areas that I look at and that IBM's been looking at and thinking, well, what are the areas that we need to adapt and how can AI possibly help us? Those areas are these: your strategy, your data, your platform, and your expertise. And when you think about your strategy, I thought this was kind of phenomenal. 80% of the businesses have the wrong strategy in place. Now, I'm curious, I don't know the data necessarily behind that, but I'm curious, how many CIOs or CEOs, raised their hand when they said, "Is your strategy in place?" It's like, no, I don't have one. I can't imagine where they found 80% of people to actually say that. But the point is that I guess when challenged and you said, what is it you're trying to do and how are you trying to get there and do you have a strategy for that? There's a lot of people that are just working off of something that's wrong. When it comes to data, this is an overused, we know there's too much data. There's just way too much for mere humans and mere mortals to understand. A platform, we see it. I'm sure a lot of people in this room maybe see it, but a lot of the digital transformation strategies that people have and the chances that they have of doing that within their organizations fail. That's a 15% success rate. Las Vegas odds for success is like 13%. So if you're going through a digital transformation, you got like a 2% chance better than winning something in Vegas. And then your expertise. Employees waste 19% of their time a week just searching for stuff. Now, maybe it's because I'm an older person now, I'm getting more mature, but time to me and wasting time is insane. And that we actually have people spending a lot of their time just looking for things or going through the process or just munging through data. We have marketing people out there today who went to school and envisioned. Some of you are probably in the room. You went to school, you're creative, you're innovative, you have these ideas, you have these wonderful things to do. And now you're spending most of your time being data analysts and trying to write SQL queries or whatever it is to try to find the information that you need to get your job done. And a lot of that time that we spent, I consider it wasted time. And so leveraging your expertise is a topic we're going to go to. So the first thing, we'll get to strategy. I'm from Georgia, I'm from the South, so you'll have to excuse me, but I love this guy, Mark Twain. And I love the fact that this quote about it's not the things that you don't know that's going to kill you, it's the things you know for sure that just ain't so. So many times we're acting on stuff that we are guaranteed that we know. We know our customers. We know our customer data. I sit across the table often from executives who say, it's not a problem of who our customers are. We know our customers. It's like, no, you don't. You may know something about your customers, but you really don't know your customers. And you don't know your customers of tomorrow. There's so many times we sit on things because we're comfortable. That's one of the things our brain likes us to be, is comfortable. And we're comfortable with this concept that we know things. And the problem is that concept of that we know things needs to be challenged at times. So what is it you really know? So AI will actually give you some, what I would consider superior sight, some insights into some things that you may not have seen before. Now this next example is ice harvesters. And some of you who know Guy Kawasaki, I give credit to this. This is off of one of his talks. But ice harvesters, people that would go out to frozen lakes and carve chunks of ice out and carry them into town. Anyone have kids with the movie Frozen? Yeah. You've seen ice harvesters, right? The opening scene. It was interesting. I have 7 grandkids, and we have one of those Ford Expeditions that has a DVD player in it. I listened to Frozen 100 times before I actually ever saw the movie. And when I saw the movie, I'm like, oh, that's what that looks like. I could sing all the songs, I could do everything. But anyway, the opening scene of Frozen is ice harvesters. Guy Kawasaki calls this Ice 1.0. It's the first aspect of this. Along came someone who said, you know what, we actually have machinery, we have freezing machines and whatever. We can actually take water and make ice out of them, and they're large and big, and so we'll make these things called ice houses. And that gives us ice in town, in places where maybe even the weather is not conducive to ice, but we can produce ice called ice house, and that's ice 2.0. And then someone said, well, if we take those compressors, those condensers, those refrigeration machines, and make them small enough, we can put them in homes, that's ice 3.0. What Guy pointed out, and what I think is remarkable, is that there's no ice harvesters companies who ever became ice houses, and no ice houses company that ever became refrigeration companies. It's because of what they were thinking about. What did they know? Well, I'm over here in the ice harvest business. I know that what I need is sharper saws and better sleds. That's what I need. That's what I have to have. And they weren't looking to what is my goal? What am I really trying to do? And what you're trying to do is actually deliver frozen water economically to people in their homes. And if they thought that way, they might have made that change. And if we look at some of our strategies that we have in place, we are challenged by that. I'm not going to go through the process of naming the Kodaks and the Blackberries and the others of the world who actually missed on those opportunities. But the idea is that we have to look individually at our own strategies, as small as they may be or as big as our aspirations might be, and try to understand how can I possibly understand what's going on to a way that I can actually affect my strategy. Because the amount of data that's out there, the amount of personal data, the amount of marketing data, the amount of information that you have at your disposal, that you have at your access to, it's almost incredible to even fathom. And the point is, how can I possibly use AI to get those insights, those things I need? Well, within IBM, we actually have embedded AI into a number of our products, and one of them gives us marketing insights. And from the marketing insights angle, it allows us to do things like, where are people like you? You're a customer of Myers, you seem to be loyal. I can reach out to you, I can touch you, but the question is, who are other people like you? And what does it mean to be like you? Does it mean to be in the same social economic status? Does it mean to be similar in geography? What does it mean to be like you? We can look at things like even like the weather. What's your tendency to buy certain things based on the weather? And where might I reach my next customer based on those kind of aspects of data? This is probably one of the busier slides you'll ever see from me, but this is the API for marketers. And anyone ask a question about any one of these APIs, I will kill you. No, I will send you to someone who does know. In fact, we have a kid, I forget his kid's name, but he's like 14 years old, and he writes code on Watson. And he spoke at a conference that I spoke at not long ago. He was on stage and he's talking about queries and language and Lisp code and all kinds of stuff. And then I get on stage following him. And I said, if you have any hard questions, I've got this 14-year-old over here who can answer for you. So I'll find somebody to answer your question if you have one. But here's the different areas that you can actually use Watson. And there's some pretty incredible things here around even visual recognition, language translation, other things that you could begin to look at and say, if I had that capability against this piece of data, what might that do for me? Last week, I was at a conference in Nashville called Story. And it's a gathering of storytellers. And we talked about how cognitive can help creatives and how we can take large bodies of text and run it through personality insights to understand what is the person who wrote this? What would that tell me about the person who wrote that? Or maybe some analytics around the types of words that people use in their Twitter feed. Can you imagine that? As to what type of person might this be, or what are they coming across as? So it helps us in all kind of areas to understand what our message is. You take your email campaigns, you run them through and say, this was a successful campaign. What was the tone? What was the analytics on this, the tone? And how might I meet that for my new campaign? So these APIs are here. And for those of you, I talked to someone earlier who was talking about just getting into this. This is one of those things you can actually play around with. And so if you go to ibm.com/Watson, there's developer toolkits, there's places you can go and play with it for free and mess around with it. So I would encourage you to get started, because the strategy, as far as your strategy is concerned, and having those insights, it's going to be important for you to actually see where your next customer is going to be. The second piece of this is data. Data is becoming, data is the new currency, data is the new whatever. The point is that we have so much of it, and someone actually tells we have too much of it, and I question that. Can you ever have too much data? You may have too much for you to actually control or manage, but is that even possible now? With AI, the more data, the more voluminous of information that you can get to, the more things that you can put together. And in the past, we've always limited ourselves. I call them intuitive fences. We have these fences that we build based on things that we know, back to the Twain quote. And one thing I know is that if I have lots of data, it's hard for me to put it together. Or if I have lots of data, it's hard for me to find the common points. Well, the great thing about what we're doing with AI is the AI can find those common points for you. So it's not a matter of you having to go through and manually find all those things, but AI can often find those relative points and help you build the basis on which you will ask questions. So this will give you a certain amount of strength. Strength that you currently don't have. And I know the Darwin quote said it's not the strongest that survives, but believe me, having strength is not going to be a problem for you. I mean, it's going to help you in the way as you adapt. I don't know how many of you are from New York, but I'm from Atlanta. Traffic's bad in Atlanta, but I drive in Atlanta. I'd never drive in New York. Okay, I'll let you know. I'm gonna ask you to do me a question. I want you to visualize for a minute that you're in your car and you're going to go to your work. Okay, or let's put it somewhere further, maybe an airport, someplace away from you. And you're going to have to take some busy intersections, some highways and some freeways and whatever. Before you get in that car, I'm going to take some black tape or film, and I'm going to cover every window in your car. Every window, every backup mirror, every camera, everything. So you can't see anything outside the internals of your car. Then I'm going to take a little X-Acto knife or whatever, and then I'm going to cut away little gaps here or there, whatever, and give you about 20% view around you. And now I'm going to put you in your car, and I'm going to say, now go wherever you need to go. Go to the airport. Go do that. Oh, by the way, every other car on the road has the same visual impairment. Right. So tell me your feelings. A little anxious? What's that? I'm listening. Oh, it's terrifying to think about that, right? I mean, my wife is not comfortable in heavy traffic. And so yesterday in the cab coming from the airport, she sat next to me and held my hand. And when I got to the hotel, my fingers were like blue because she just squeezed them to death, right? And truly, it was one of the best rides I'd had in New York City. So she should have been on a bad one. The point is, the angst that you would have, how can I possibly make it to my destination? How can I possibly get there without just maybe driving slow? But now I'm going to tell you that it's going to be raining, and I want you to go faster. You need to get there quickly. Now think about your angst, and you're driving this car. How can I possibly do this? Well, what I'd like to offer you is that 80% of the businesses in the world are driving their companies like this. They're looking at about 20% of the data that they have actually access to or rights to. They're driving their business looking at about 20% of what's around them. Now, if I were to take you out of that car for a moment and remove all the film, line your mirrors, shine up your dash cameras, everything, get you all set up, and put you back on the road. And by the way, most of the other cars still on the road still have a visual impairment. And so there's still going to be problems. There's going to be things you're going to have to go around. But what's your confidence level now? Hopefully it's raised a little bit. You'll be able to see things ahead of time. You'll be able to see problems that might be occurring. You'll be able to see alternate routes of doing things. You'll see ways in which you can actually use it. This is what AI can actually do for your business. It can actually give you insights that you did not have the opportunity for. Now, granted, is all of it important at one time? It's not all important. You know, as you drive a car, it's important for me to look ahead. It's also important for me to look at my mirrors. Your head's not on a swivel, but it is looking around. You're watching. That's the way you should be running your business, being able to see things without having things in your way. And AI can help you do that. Because most of the data that's out there, there's a lot of it that is available to us, things that we can get to, point of sale data, transactional data, whatever. And about 80% of it is structured stuff. It's unstructured stuff, excuse me. It's stuff that we normally haven't had access to. It's text, it's sentences, it's documents, it's tweets, it's things that we maybe don't capitalize on as much as we like to because it's unstructured and it's kind of hard for a lot of machines and a lot of things that we work with to actually run through that. So what we've been doing is we've been spending our life on this bottom part, this transactional data, product, CRM, pricing, distribution center data, those types of things. And so we're running our business on that bottom 20% when that 80% of there is available to us. And what's even interesting is that the 80% up there, only about 0.5% of that is ever even analyzed, even though 30% of it is useful. Like I said, all 80% is not necessarily useful to you, but 30% of it definitely is in most cases, and you're not even looking at that. And so imagine if you just could double your insights from 20% to say 40. We're saying that 50% would give you a good range. What would that look like to you? So if you have data, you'll have some superior strength, and you'll have some strength beyond that which your competitors have, beyond that which maybe new people in the marketplace have. The third area we want to look at is platform. This is our CEO, Jenny Rometty, and she said that when you remove layers, simplicity and speed happens. You can imagine with a company like IBM, we have a few layers, and a lot of the data that we have, a lot of the systems that we have layers. And we've gone through the process of saying, how do we remove those layers? How do we make things simpler? How do we make things easier for people to use and more digestible? How do we put this technology that we have that's so powerful, how can we start embedding that into things and into places that actually matter? Because with this data, with AI, it actually gives you the speed that's necessary. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work that we're doing. This is outside of marketing, so you'll have to excuse me for a minute, but I remember I deal with humans a lot, and so therefore human things tend to get my attention. But some of you may be familiar with what Watson's doing in the area of oncology and cancer and so forth. There was a 60 minutes interview by Charlie Rose with a guy named Dr. Sharpless, and he runs an oncology center. And the excerpt from this interview was this, and that Charlie Rose asked, he said, to be on top of everything that's out there, all the trials taking place around the world seems like an incredible task for any one university or one facility to do. And Dr. Sharpless said, it's essentially undoable. And what they were doing was people were coming to them that had cancer treatments that had failed. They'd come to this area in North Carolina, into the university, and they would look at them and they'd say, what kind of plans or what kind of programs or what kind of trials might be out there for us to use? And he admitted that because there's so many papers written every day, because there's so many research trials being opened every day, that they were actually working on data that was 16 months old. But he said they took Watson, and this is his words, they taught Watson to read medical literature essentially in about a week, and it wasn't very hard, which I thought was interesting that he said that. And then Watson read 25 million papers in about another week, and then also scanned the web for clinical trials open in other centers, and all of a sudden, we had this complete list that was sort of everything we needed to know. Now, this is a guy that was originally skeptical. He said, oncology is a really hard thing to do. And all this did was allowed him to have a basis on which to ask questions. Again, outside of marketing, but it's still, let's try to look at the same technology and how it might be used against your data. One of the things he did was he said, I'm a little skeptical about Watson and about its ability to work with our doctors. They plays Jeopardy. Come on, how many times do I have a Jeopardy question when I'm doing cancer research? And so what he actually did was they took 300 cases and they compared it that they had already proposed treatment for. They ran that through Watson, and Sharpless announced that about 98% of the things that Watson had predicted as far as cancer treatment was exactly what his doctors had recommended. And I remember Charlie Rose saying, well, I guess that made you feel good about Watson. And Sharpless said, no, it made me feel good about my doctors because here's this machine confirmed. But then he said something that I thought was back to that idea of what is it we're not asking? He said, but not only that, but in 30% of those cases, Watson came up with a second diagnosis, an alternative treatment that we should have considered that we didn't consider because we didn't look at it. Because it was a treatment that was a trial that was just opened a day before or a week before. But it said, is that kind of thing, that kind of ability to augment what we're doing as humans that makes it important. And so that gives us the speed. So now instead of doctors spending their time necessarily going through this data, they now have that ability to ask the questions. And you as marketing people, instead of you trying to figure out, okay, so what data do I need? You can begin asking your applications itself. So tell me, what campaign worked really well last year? And saying it in that way, natural language. What email campaign worked best last year? Tell me the attributes of that campaign. Compare that campaign to this campaign. How will this campaign compare? Those kind of questions allow you to actually work with speed rather than having to work through the intricacies and all the barriers that you see in these, what I call these intuitive fences. And making that available in the cloud. For the gentleman I spoke to earlier this morning, you're talking about getting started, and maybe you're a small company, maybe you're a small organization. What we've done, because Jenny and IBM has done this, is we put this stuff in the cloud now. And it's available to the smallest of organizations to the largest of organizations. And so that same access to that AI, same access to those APIs, like I said, a 14-year-old kid got a hold of them and did magical things with them. And you can do them as well. So it's not beyond your reach. It allows you to actually access and speed up your business. So this will give you hopefully something that makes you more agile. And then the last piece of this is expertise. I think people are awesome. And I think each one of you probably has amazing knowledge and amazing expertise that you've learned and that you've passed on. In fact, there was a guy, forget his name now, it's The Rules of the Telecosm was the name of the book. But he wrote about how the two things that actually limit us, he calls the speed of light was one thing because you can only go so fast. He said, and the span of life is going to be a limiting factor because as you live, you learn. And when you die, your learning is gone. And if you're going to pass that learning on to anyone else, you have to pass it on and they have to learn it. So as long as we live is about as long as we're going to learn. And I actually believe that AI may not have broken that, but I believe it put a dent in it because now we can actually start taking AI systems that can learn your business and learn what you know. And so through AI, watching over the shoulders of workers, they can actually observe what is it you're going through, what is it you're working on, what struggles are you having, what struggles are your customers having, what questions are being asked, how do I answer those? And you teach AI just like you would any other thing. You can teach AI, here's the way we handle this, here's the way we behave, here's the way what we do, and then AI can pick that up for you. And can also help others. We do a lot of stuff in the area of, say, with the supply chain and marketing and so forth, where we say, well, here's a process, here's what we do. It can actually look at it and say, the thing that's broken right now, or the thing that's broken in your chain or in your process, it's been broken before, and here's the people who fixed it, and here's how they fixed it. I would suggest you look at this. So those kind of promptings, those kind of taking the expertise and the things you learned today and passing it on to someone else is something that's incredible. And the reason that this is different is very much because AI in the past has been very much an idea of let's try to build a machine that thinks like a brain. And that's not what we decided to do. We said, let's build a machine that can help people in certain ways. And the ways it helps people in these areas, it observes, it interprets, and it evaluates, and it decides. The reason I show this picture is because a couple years ago, I had an accident, and the quad tendons on the top of between my muscle and my knee on both legs severed, okay, which meant I fell down and couldn't get back up. So they had to fix those. And upon fixing those, it took me a while. I was in bed for a long time and then had to basically learn to walk again. And even today, you'll all watch me, but as I step off the stage, I have to be careful because I'm still learning some things. My legs are still learning things. So for me, when I come into a lobby like this and I say, okay, I have to observe, what am I going to do? I need to go upstairs or I need to go downstairs. I'm interpreting the data that's there. I'm saying, upstairs, easy. Right now, walking upstairs is easy. Going downstairs is harder, believe it or not. But there's an elevator. And by the way, I'm observing there's an elevator and the doors are open. So maybe that's a better case. For some of you, the decision would be different. Some of you are athletes. How many of you ran this morning? Anyone get up and jog this morning? We hate you. Okay, but the rest, you can put your hand down. The point is, you've already made the decision. When you get there, you're taking the stairs. That's just the way you are. AI will learn the way you handle things and the way you manage things and interpret for them and help you make the right decisions or help you point you toward the right decisions. Because the thing we do every day is we take action. That's our jobs. We do things. We take actions. And actions that we take are based on the decisions we make. So our brain makes decisions and we say, okay, so this is the action. This is the course of action. Most time those decisions come from answers. Answers to queries, answers to reports, answers to readouts, answers to whatever. We ask questions, and I don't know how many of you actually use like analytic tools and whatever, and you ask these structured questions. But if anyone's done that and you're honest with yourself, most of us, when we ask a question of a system, especially in these systematic data kind of ways, we kind of know what the answer is going to be. I mean, it's almost like we can predict the answer. Now, sometimes it falls outside of ranges and we're surprised by that, but normally based on the questions we ask, we get certain answers. That's where we at IBM thought, well, this is probably an area that we could improve on. So is it about getting better answers? No, it's about getting better questions. Let's go back to the question area. What is the question you're asking? And how might you ask a better question? In fact, I recently worked with an education team on building a session around how do you ask better questions? And this is for young people. Because they believe the answers are there. It's just go find it, right? But the challenge is, how do I ask the right questions? And this is a chain that goes across. And so if you have a lousy question, you're going to get a lousy answer and a lousy decision and a lousy action. But if you ask the best question, if you ask a question that's has some insights to it, some curiosity questions. I love curiosity. I love the creative spirit in us. And I like for us to be able to ask questions that are on the fringe. What about this? What if, right? If you could ask those kind of questions and get answers, maybe you could make better decisions and take better actions. Because again, that's back to the same way the AI works. It's about observing, interpreting, evaluating, and making those decisions. So your expertise. This will make you more valuable. And the reason I say it's making you more valuable, because a lot of people look at AI and say, well, they're going to replace us. AI is going to take our jobs. AI is going to take my knowledge. Why am I teaching this machine? Because it's going to take over my job. The actual thing that AI is actually helping us do is actually make us more valuable, because I would guarantee that I guess most of you right now, probably in your course of a week, spend 6 or 7 hours in email, maybe, answering email. And I'll bet your job description doesn't say answer email. That's not one of the things that you were hired to do, but yet we do it. What if you email? What if those kind of things could actually be sorted for you and said, here's the things that are important to you, here's the things that aren't important to you, based on the fact that I know you because I've watched you and I've observed you and I know who's important and who's not. I know meetings that you have coming up, so this email is more important than others. Imagine if you could have that kind of thing. Imagine if you could leverage the expertise within your organization. And so this idea of being able to take these four aspects of strategy and making you more relevant, looking at your data itself and being a little more proactive about things. Instead of waiting for things to happen, actually look ahead and say, with data, I can kind of predict, here's where I want to go. So it's not just about a strategy, but it's also about being proactive and being transparent and engaged with people. I want to be agile, obviously. I want to be able to move because the markets move, my customers move, expectations move. And then last, I want to be perceived as valuable to my customers and to those around me. Seth Godin is, again, someone I love to quote, and so I will quote him. If you're waiting for a case study in your industry, you've waited too long. Okay? And that is a true statement these days. This is, as I said, this is not a technology like mobile phones. I watched a lot of businesses. I've been around long enough to see businesses when mobile phones first came out. It's like, well, I don't know if we're going to adopt mobile in our system yet. We'll wait. We'll see you guys perfect it, get it figured out, and then we'll jump on. Well, AI is not one of those things, because AI is one of those things that the longer you wait, the farther behind you are. Because it learns. It's not so much about you learning about AI. It's about AI learning about you. Okay. If you hear nothing else today, think about that. It's not about you having to understand AI well enough that you can use it. It's about AI learning your business well enough, learning your situation well enough that you can leverage it within your organization. Because when it comes to surviving in this AI world, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, all right? It will happen to you. It's not a matter of if AI is going to impact you, it's a matter of how and when. And those are two things you can actually control. So I would very much recommend that you look into doing something and doing something as fast as possible. So with that, I will open it up to whatever questions we have posed. I don't know if any of you have posted any questions or not. Do we have any from the system? I don't know how this works. My voice of God back there. Do we have any questions? If not, we have 10 minutes. Does anyone want to ask me a question just from the audience? Yes, back here. Yes, ma'am. Oh, there is a question on the slide. So I'm not turning around and looking. Okay, what might be the main threats stemming from AI in the future? One of the threats that we are, I'll call it a threat, it's a complexity, okay? Bias. What about bias? Can you teach an AI machine to be biased? And the answer to that question is yes, you can. Because an AI machine learns. So a lot of AI systems that are out there, and especially ours, is being very guarded about how it is being fed data, what data is being fed to it. Because I think when you think of threats, now I'll take this question in two parts. The first is this idea that you could build systems that could be biased, and we're trying to protect against that. The other piece is, could people use this AI in subversive ways, I guess? And I don't know the answer to that question other than I suppose they could. I'm not sure what they would do. We're using it right now. There's a lot of people that are using it in law enforcement currently to do things like instead of putting police officers on stakeouts, they're actually just looking at the video feeds. They're putting a camera up somewhere near a hotspot, and then AI later, the Watson technology will actually look at that and tell them later, this is the house on the street that you need to go raid because it's getting this much traffic. It's this kind of people coming and going. These are the hours in which they go. I watched one guy from Delaware do a thing where they put a camera on a telephone pole to watch a bodega type place, a little store. And it watched and trafficked and facial recognition people and whatever, and said, this is the guy. He walks back and forth during the day. Cars come up, he stops and talks to them, and he walks over to this telephone pole, and then he goes back to the car. So you want to go get this guy, and the telephone pole is where he stashes his stuff. And so they're not putting people on the street anymore. They're letting cameras and AI do a lot of their work for them. So we look at it as how can it possibly help us with threats, but it's a possibility. Do you have any tips for slower organizations where iterative learning is a frightening concept? Yeah, get off the dime. I mean, ask me, I'd love to help you. One of the challenges that we have was this thing, like I said, this intuitive fences piece, and that's an area in which I do a lot of work because it's not as much about the technology. I love that someone said slower organization. What does it look like to be fast for you? I mean, those are kind of things. One of the questions that we tend to ask people, there's 5 levels of questions. I won't get into all of them, but the first level is, how do I stop the pain? The second one is, how do I feel good? And the third one is, how do I get what I want? And most of us kind of deal in those levels. Well, there's a question above that, which is, what am I capable of? And then the next one is, what are we capable of? What are we as a team? What are we together capable of? And it's those 4th and 5th level questions that we like to try to ask executives. And so if you have those challenges, you feel like you're a slow organization, you feel like you need to do more, I would ask you, find some people to ask those kind of questions for you. We can help you ask those questions as well. But it's a matter, slow is death. I'll just tell you that in most organizations these days, if you're a slow organization, it's going to be difficult. How do you validate the logic behind the direction the AI is taking you when its inner workings are opaque and beyond human? That was a deep question. Beyond human interpretation. It was built by humans. I mean, we kind of know what it works and how it works. I wouldn't say that's beyond human interpretation. I think what it is we're actually trying to, like I said, we're trying to build systems that help us make better decisions by removing those barriers that we believe that are already there. This ability that this is undoable. Like Dr. Sharp said, it's undoable. And he just admitted, it's undoable. You can't do this. And so they're living life with the satisfaction that I'm doing the best I can because the rest of this is undoable. We're trying to remove those barriers. And so is it beyond human interpretation? I don't think maybe it's beyond human comprehension, or maybe it's beyond our boundaries in which we're trying to do. So I don't know if I validated the logic in that answer or not. If that's too deep, come find me, Jeff, and I'll try to point you to a smart person. Remember, I'm not the smart person. Any good reading materials or publications you recommend to get a grip on the industry? Industry being AI or industry being marketing? I would guess industry being AI, there's a lot of good authors out there. I enjoyed, because again, back to, I love to see why things happen, not just how things happen. There's a good book called, I think it's called Jeopardy, but it's about the process of IBM going through the process of with AI and building a machine and why they built the machine. I mean, we've been doing this since 2004. I don't know if you know the story behind this, but there were a group of researchers. One of the brilliant things I love working with IBM is that we spend billions of dollars a year on research and development. And we have people who just sit around and think. I mean, we had 5 Nobel laureates that work for us, and last year we filed almost 9,000, or awarded 9,000 patents, which leads us as a leading patent award winner for 27 years, I think, consecutively. So we have these people that sit around and think these deep thoughts, right? Which I love, the fact that they're doing that. Those are the people, by the way, I'll get the answers to your questions. But there was a group of them in 2004 that were trying to determine, okay, in 2011, IBM is going to have its 100th anniversary, so we need to do something big. They call it a grand challenge. And these guys think, and ladies think about things like grand challenges. They were in Fishkill, New York. After a busy day, they went to a little steakhouse, and they were sitting at a steakhouse eating, and at 7 o'clock, something magical happened. Everyone in the restaurant got up from their seats, steaks half eaten, drinks half drunk, and went next door into the adjacent bar, because there was a television set above the bar. And at that time, they were airing Jeopardy at 7 o'clock. And Ken Jennings was on a tear. He'd won like 50 Jeopardy games in a row, which was unheard of. And it became a kind of a thing. Let's go watch Ken, see if he wins again. He went on to win 75 or whatever. He won that night as well. But as those researchers, those developers came back to their table, one of them said, what if we could build a machine that could beat Ken Jennings at Jeopardy? And that question, that what if question, it turns out that other people had thought about Jeopardy as well because we had done chess and done those other things. The question is, could we do Jeopardy? And it wasn't about could we build a machine that could play Jeopardy, but can we build a machine that can beat Ken Jennings at Jeopardy? And then, as you may know, we went on to do that. The interesting part of that story, too, is that we went to the producers of Jeopardy and asked them, can we do this? And they said, no, we're not going to let you do that because you'll embarrass us, you'll embarrass the brand and everything. And it took time for us to actually get to the point where we actually could show them a machine that would actually do that. So Jeopardy is a great book. I went off on a big, long monologue about a book, but that's the one I enjoyed reading. Most of the books that I read on AI or try to read on AI, I don't understand. So I'll be honest with you. Unless they come out in comic book fashion, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to digest them. What can AI not solve? How many angels fit on the end of a pin? I don't know. I don't know how many problems it can't solve. What we're finding interesting is that it is allowing us, as I said, to begin to do those what if questions about things that we had never thought about putting together before. What if we took this data, because it's a bunch of it, and ran it against this literature, this text? What would that look like? What kind of insights might we have? By the way, I ran a lot of Shakespeare stuff through our tone analyzer, and I'd like for you to know that Shakespeare would not normally buy things with credit cards. I found that out, okay? So, are there use cases or parameters that you've seen to help organizations be more successful at starting with AI? I think one of the first things about AI is you have to take the approach that there are things that are holding me back, and that there's data that I'm not leveraging. In other words, you have to come to that decision of, hi, I'm Louis, and I'm a dataholic or whatever it is. I don't know enough or something. You got to come to that decision to say, I think there's more. I'm curious about what's more. That's usually what holds people back. The challenge, and also the challenge, as I mentioned earlier, of trying to understand AI. I'm going to understand it so well. I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to learn all the intricacies of it. We're going to put a priesthood of programmers behind this. They're going to understand AI and what it does and how and you reverse engineer AI and whatever. And then we'll start implementing it. That's going to hold you back, okay? Look for trusted vendors. Look for vendors who are offering AI solutions, and then come alongside them, and then just get started, especially if they can make it easy for you to use. And my questions have just ceased. So I'm going to be around for the rest of the day. If anyone would like to reach out and grab me for some reason, if anyone's interested in storytelling in general, I'd love to help you. But I'll tell you, the rest of the day, I don't know how many of you are planning on staying in this track, but we have some really bright and intelligent people that's going to be on the stage today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them. So I want to thank you for investing your time. Because you did, by the way, if any of you do reach out and find me later, just say, Louis, I was in your session. I'd like to take some time with you. And you invested 45 minutes with me, I can invest 45 minutes with you too. So please feel free to do that, okay? You guys have a great week, all right? Thank you.